Hello, everyone. Welcome to Liam's Lyceum. I'm your host, Liam, aka Himbar. It has been quite a week, mostly for reasons I will not go into here. But for reading, it's been okay, though I finished not very much in some ways. I finished 3 books, uh, two of which I will review because one of them I've read several times, um, and it was just kind of a spur of the moment. I actually listened to it this time, and that was Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. The other one I finished was Forging the Blade. One of the other ones I finished, and I enjoyed it. It is like nominally like Arthurian, kind of at the end mostly. Um, it's not like the best thing I've ever read. It does work as a standalone for anyone interested, even though it is introduced as the first in a series. And I think the author has passed on, so I don't think we're getting any more. Um, I do like that it is like gothic stuff. It has the Aryan conversion of a lot of the goths, and even Wolfula does appear in here. It is interesting in that sense, but not like super gripping. It reminds me some ways of some Ed Greenwood novels where it does progress pretty fast, but it's just going back and forth, and like little tiny steps. Right, it'll be like one little section on Fritigern and then one little section on Thulian. It eventually gets where it's going. It does take place over several years as well. Um, but it's just I don't know. It takes a hot minute to get anywhere. Um, and normally when it does start getting entertaining, it doesn't stay very entertaining, or it doesn't stay entertaining for very long. Maybe a few pages, and then you're just back to the okay, this isn't bad, but it's not particularly gripping story essentially. Um, okay, the other book I finished, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, was great, by the way. I can't even remember which translation it was. Jesse Weston's translation, I think. It's a rather old one. Um, it wasn't bad. I was writing a story actually, and I wrote most of that story this week. I'm writing this one with a co-author, which I think is going well, and I think it shall turn out fine. And so I wanted something on kind of in the background while I was writing because it's Arthurian in nature, not as heavy style as my last Arthurian story I wrote, which did get accepted for publication. I mentioned it here. In fact, it's the one that got accepted by Old Moon. So whenever that comes out, I'll do a video on it. But it is still stylized, kind of Arthurian, but again, more accessible in some ways. So, anyways, also just not as weird, just more straightforward. Reads more just like a medieval thing rather than just like a weird pastiche. So, anyways, the other book I finished though, and this is the one I need to talk about, is Deathless Beast by Andrew D. Meredith, and I finished it twice. Okay, so I finished it on. I switched my calendar, didn't I? Yes. Okay, I finished it on the 29th, I think, the first time, which is Monday. And then I finished it again on the first. So I finished it twice, and I finished it that second time 2 days after I finished it the first time, because pretty much I finished it and I started reading it again right after. I don't know. It just felt like I didn't pay enough attention that first time, which is weird because I really enjoyed it, and I did. I mean, I did get more from reading the second time. I've never done that. Okay, if you watch this channel, you know I don't reread much. I do reread some. Like I reread the first RuneScape novel, Prince Armistice and the Dragon. Both of those are by T.S. Church. I reread The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, of course. I really like to read Book of the New Sun uh, sometime soon-ish, probably. But I only read that for the first time after I started my channel. Uh, I reread Castle in the Attic some months ago. So I don't reread a bunch, but I do reread some. I've never once finished a book and then just like let's go back and read this again, which is funny because I didn't think it was amazing. I'm not like in love with the book or anything. I just felt like it was worth a reread and might as well do it right now, type of thing. And I'm happy that I did. I really enjoyed the book. I really enjoyed Deathless Beast. I talked about it some last week. I think it really nails a certain aspect of fantasy that Um, I mentioned this in my review that I have not recorded yet, but that is often either ignored, or when it is not ignored, it is caricatured or demonized, and that is religion. I mean, something like even like Malazan, right? Malazan has religion, but it doesn't treat any of the gods really like they're actually divine in any way, right? No one actually believes in them like real people do. I mean, like I studied anthropology, and guess what? Human beings believe in higher powers, even the ones that don't claim to often do in some sense, and that's more of a recent development anyways, maybe 19th or even or 20th century. 20th century, 19th century, if you're being generous, I guess. And that's just part of being human, right? And it often is just simply ignored, or really shallow in a way. Not like it's poorly done, but it's just not, doesn't have a lot of tension put into it. Something like Malazan, when I mentioned Malazan, is that pretty much Goku would be a god, and no one is worshiping Goku as a god, right? Because I just mean because he's really powerful, right? And that's essentially what makes a god of Malazan. So, and you can tell Erickson. I think that's Erickson's own mindset coming through in that sense, which is fine, right? Because when you read Tolkien, I mean, like you're getting his, and it makes sense because Meredith is Christian, but he doesn't have to be Christian, I guess. But he, religious, and so I think that works rather well, and it reminds me actually a good amount of Crown of Stars by Kate Elliott, in that sense. That religion in that works rather well. Also say like the religion with definitely different flavor in this case, and the second one I'm going to say, but the similar in some sense though to Basil Bonnickson and the War God series by David Weber. What's the name of that? Oath of Swords, I think is the first book in that, where it's about a guy who is of a race, like it's unique to the series. So Hordani, it's not going to mean anything to you if you haven't read the series, and they're like outcasts among all the other races. And then suddenly one of them's called to be a champion, essentially a paladin of the War God, all right, and just his adventures and dealing with that as well. Or even a little bit on how like the faith is treated in something like The Curse of Chalion by Lois McMaster Bujold. So those are good examples as well, I think. And Meredith does a good job, I think. In some ways, it is, well, I've heard it compared to The Pillars of the Earth, but Epic Fantasy. I have not read Pillars of the Earth. Okay, scratch that. I started reading Pillars of the Earth this week, actually. It is a little different than, say, like Codvel Chronicles or The Name of the Rose, which are different than this, but similar in some ways too. So actually, so far, I'm liking the tone of The Pillars of the Earth less than both The Name of the Rose and Codvel Chronicles, but it is still, I'm still really not far into it. I'm like 50 pages in, maybe. So, anyways, but yeah, Deathless Beast, I enjoyed it. I think, wow, that alarm came back on. That alarm is normally switched to off, but since it got reset because the power went out today, the alarm came back on. That's annoying. Sorry, you probably heard that. That probably woke up one of my children. Anyways, yes, so Deathless Beast, I'm really enjoying it. I really enjoyed it both times. Again, not like a favorite, but it's just like enjoyable, very nice to sink my teeth into. And I'm looking forward to Bone Shroud. I did listen to Deathless Beast. A very kind person bought me Audible membership because I can't afford any subscription right now. And so when I get a new credit next month, I will get Bone Shroud. I think that's what book 2 is called. So anyways, yes, I think that's most of the stuff. Let's see. Oh, yeah. So To Speak with Elders is something I'm also reading by Mike Molman. I read Becoming a Druid a couple of years ago, I think. I enjoyed it. Not quite my cup of tea, but the second book I'm enjoying more in some sense because I'm used to the tone of it. It doesn't really stress on being like realistic. Feels very contemporary, even colloquial in how the stuff is spoken about, but it's still fun, like heroic fantasy, and lots of action. Plot moves along very fast. So yeah, I'm enjoying that. I'm actually decently far into that one, so I should finish that this week pretty easily. And then the last one that I'm in the middle of is I've actually had this book up here before, and I got it a little wet, so it's unfortunate. That was an accident. The perks of children. Anyways, but they're wonderful, by the way. And I've been reading this for a couple of years, I think. I've read the first 8 stories in here already. Well, I decided that I would tackle the next one more of it like it was its own book, because it's the longest one in here. It's probably novella length, and so I'll probably actually even review it, since I probably won't do a whole review for this whole volume. I do mention this volume actually in my underappreciated author spotlight for Arthur Gokreis Roeder. who you can go watch that, but is an author I recommend. And so these are historical adventure stories from about 100 years ago in Adventure magazine, and this one that I'm reading, Judgment by Steel, is following Serkamon. They sometimes have both Fate and Serkamon in them, but it's normally just one of them. And Serkamon is the main character in this one. Fate probably won't show up at all. He hasn't showed up at least. Or am I a fourth of the way through? Um, Serkamon is a troubadour. It's 1137. The last story, he helped set up Louis in Illinois of Aquitaine. So that kind of gives you an idea of what's going on. The first story actually follows Fate mostly, and it's set in Toulouse. This one is in Barcelona, the county Barcelona, as it was at the time, and deals with a murder and someone seemingly falsely accused of that murder, and a potential duel that is going to happen, and the person that is innocent, or rather the person defending the innocent person, it has like no chance of winning that duel. And so Serkamon is trying to figure out some time. Well, he's got time actually, 2 months away, but to figure out how to make it so Barcelona, in a sense, and the people that are not in the wrong come out on top over Navarre and the people who seemingly did some wrong. If you need your medieval kingdoms, I'm sure everyone's familiar with Barcelona, but I'll look up a 12th century map of my goodness, that peninsula. But anyways, so anyways, I'm enjoying it. Very enjoyable. They're rather fast paced, but they have a certain language to them that feels chivalric. And Broder is he was a language guy actually, like Tolkien, if you're unaware of him. But he didn't write fantasy. He wrote historical fiction. Some of it's really on the fiction side of historical fiction, but like in the Grip of the Minotaur, which starts with a Viking longship rolling up to Troy, which is one of the coolest openings of a book I've ever read. Still, that book actually influenced my novella. If you read in the Grip of the Minotaur, you can probably see in my novella where it is influenced. Even the title of the book probably is actually clear enough, but it doesn't quite work like that actually in the Grip of the Minotaur. I messed with it a little bit in my book, but anyways. It's been a good week. So I would say I think my Wednesday video will be about my latest publications that have been coming out in October and September. So anyways, and then hopefully another video on a little bit of Arthurian stuff. So yeah, we'll see. Anyways, let me know what you've been reading. I haven't gotten a lot of views lately, but that's pretty normal. Anyways, so Leapings, Lyceum. I'll catch you next time. I appreciate you.